is like TACDA. Hello?
Sorry,
Live free.
I just started the recording. I was a little bit slow on that,
Oh, okay.
so just
Live
go
free
ahead.
is a not live Live free is a not-for-profit tax deductible organization, a lot like TACDA. We don't have any paid employees at all. It's all volunteers, volunteer officers, volunteer instructors, volunteer writers. Uh, we're dedicated to helping citizens prepare to survive various types of disasters. We're broad-based. We're talking about everything from getting lost in the woods to nuclear war to everything in between. We conduct programs and have publications related to that. So this is our mission. Pretty clear. We stick to the mission. I talk a lot about organizations that have mission creep. We're not political. We're not religious. We're basically just a public service organization. But we do believe philosophically that self-reliance is the foundation of a free society. So that's where the live and the free comes in. So we're not the National Survival Organization or the National Preparedness Support Organization. We are Live Free USA because we believe in that idea. Our motto is self-reliance, preparedness, and responsibility. Responsibility is a big thing with us. You know, you hear a lot about the doomsday survivalists and the kind of bad publicity that so-called survivalists get. And we definitely push our responsibility in being a responsible organization, a community-based organization that works with the community and makes the communities and the families stronger. So that's where we're at. That's where we come from, where we're coming from. We seriously believe that the Live Free USA and TACDA particularly are much more relevant now than we were back in the 60s during the Cold War days, because the what we call the threat matrix, we put out a threat matrix every year of the 10 most likely disasters. The threat matrix is much more complex than it was back in the 60s. The hazards are much more immediate than they were in the 60s. And frankly, with the time of all the complacency and the denial that the public is in and the unpreparedness of our youth today, we're in a much more vulnerable position. So our organizations like Live Free and like TACDA are much more relevant. So we're looking for officers. Anybody out there who wants to get involved with us, we're glad to have you. We're looking for contributors because the only money we get is from memberships and from contributions. And we even had a survival training center back in the 80s up in Wisconsin. We keep that dream alive, although it's a long way from being a reality at this point. So let's move on to what you tuned in for. And there's the old saying, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And you have to have plans. They don't always work out the way you want, but you have to have them. And by the way, you'll notice that I departed from the fancy layouts that PowerPoint provides for us, because I don't know what size screens you're all looking at. So I just wanted to be very clear, not a lot of complications and designs on it. So I do know how to do those things. It's just that I felt I should stick to the basics for you. So we have two kinds of disasters that we have to plan for. We have acute disasters and chronic disasters. Yes, I used to be an EMT, so we had acute injuries and chronic problems. Acute means things that are happening immediately, happening right now that you have to react to right now. You have to have a plan. Sometimes you have to make the plans on the fly. Things like assault, crime, civil disorder, conventional warfare. Now, conventional warfare back in 1941 when I was born, I remember my parents dealing with what we call the wartime life and wartime conditions, where the war was somewhere else. Now we have to deal with planning for conventional warfare situations, like the people in the Ukraine, the people in Gaza, Israel, Russia. They're dealing with conventional warfare. So you have to have a plan for that, because those two oceans don't count anymore. America is just as likely to experience those kind of things with the incoming drones, incoming hypersonic missiles with conventional warfare warheads specifically targeted. Nuclear warfare is back on the table big time. Biological warfare or a natural pandemic, highly likely, as likely as it was 20 years ago, as likely as it was in 2019. Nothing has changed We still have the same population density and the people moving around, and we've got these bad actors out there and rogue nations and terrorists just brewing up stuff all the time. Grid failure, we're experiencing that. Weather, severe weather and fires and home fires. We definitely should have a plan for home fires. A lot of people don't have that. Remember, if you die in a home fire, you're just as dead as if you died in a nuclear holocaust. So you have to plan for these kind of what I call acute disasters. And then chronic disasters, the asymmetric warfare. If you don't know what asymmetric warfare is, you're not paying attention. China's been waging asymmetric warfare against us for decades. Economic warfare, they use influencers, social influencers. I hate social influencers, but that's another subject. They promoted divisiveness. They promote disinformation. This is all done what we call asymmetric warfare. They're not fighting our military. They're fighting our civilians. Our civilians are the victims. So when you're out there in the world now, especially on the internet, you're in a war zone. Declining economic conditions. Wow. I can tell you as a child that a one income family could pay off a house in 20 years. You think you can do that now? Anybody can do that? I can tell you we've definitely declined, and it's a accelerating process. Political instability, climate change, increases in crime, all of this. And I can also tell you, being involved with the EMS, emergency management services, the fire department, all their budgets are getting cut. They're struggling to get volunteers. They're struggling to get help. Who wants to be a policeman nowadays? Who wants to be a fireman? I was just talking to somebody in a volunteer fire department, and they said they're going to ask them to wear bulletproof vests. Now, if you've ever worn a fireman's outfit in full turnout gear, another 66 pounds, which I've worn a bulletproof vest from time to time, another 6 pounds is not something you want to put on somebody. But that's the kind of world we're in. So you have to start planning for these kind of things. So a German general said, no plan survives the first contact with the enemy. We can paraphrase that easily by saying no survival plan survives first contact with reality. So while I'm telling you how to make plans, and I'm going to give you some techniques for emergency planning, I have to also tell you that you can plan, you can be sure that your plan isn't going to be perfect and that it's going to have to be adjusted as you go along. So what do we need to plan for? Nuclear warfare, obviously the obvious one. You have to have a plan for that. Are you going to shelter in place? Are you going to do a rapid evacuation? Are you going to evacuate and then shelter in place? Are you going to shelter in place and then evacuate? Depending on where you live, depending on your level of preparedness, your situation, that's something you have to plan. Know what you're going to do before it happens. Conventional warfare. You see now that, okay, you got drones coming in. Maybe you got sabotage in your area. Maybe that chemical plant down the road gets sabotaged. Or maybe you live near an area where some drones come in, or some hypersonic missiles, because they're not going to be targeting your home, but they'll target various military, industrial targets. You have to have a plan for that. Biological warfare, as I mentioned, I don't know what your pandemic plan is, but you need to have a pandemic plan. Now, I have training in respiratory protection. I have an EMT. It was very easy when I saw things happening that told me things were happening in China and things were happening locally. There was something going around and no one knew what it was, but one of my friends actually died and they didn't know why until later. So things were happening. I implemented my biological warfare, or if you want, my pandemic plan. Most people didn't have a plan for that. I can guarantee you there will be another pandemic in the next 10 years. Probably a 50% chance in the next 5 years. Grid failure already happening. And all of these things are tied together. So if you see one or two of these things happening, it's most likely going to cause a domino effect and cause these others. So the whole system, our whole survival system that we depend on, the grid, if you will, is basically a house of cards. And we saw a little bit of that. We got a glimpse of it during the pandemic. So now that the pandemic's over, doesn't mean it's time to to relax. It's time to double down. Civil disorders, we saw a lot of that. I've experienced different civil disorders. Fire suppression, by the way, big thing. You should have lots of fire extinguishers. You should have a fire plan in your house. You should have everybody trained. First aid, everybody should have a good, first aid kit. That urgent care and the fire department aren't going to be there when you need them when things get tough. And then economic stability, instability. What can I say? One thing I would say is hang on to some cash. A lot of people depend that the first thing is going to go is the internet. The next thing is going to go is your cell phones and your credit cards. All of those things are going to go. A lot of our satellites and our communication systems and our computer systems are highly dependent. So cash may again be king, but have things you can trade, have things you can, and have cash. Okay, step-by-step process. One of our mantras is happen to it before it happens to you. Happen to things before they happen to you. That's a good survival process. It's one of my 10 survival techniques and one of my 10 survival strategies. So first thing you have to do is establish a trigger. So what is it exactly that's going to tell you that you need to implement your plan, to implement your survival plan? And we'll talk about that, but you have to have a trigger, something that everybody in your family knows and you understand, or in your survival group understands, that if this happens, I see this in the news, I hear this, I hear, there's noise down the street from gunfire, whatever it may be that triggers your implementation of your plan. What actions are required to prepare for the emergency? So you get those first hints that things are going bad. There's been a nuclear exchange or a naval battle in the China Sea, or nuclear weapons been used in the Ukraine. What actions do you have to start taking at that point? That's the trigger. Those are the triggers, and these are the first things you're going to do. What actions are required first? You have a list of, we're going to do this first, then we're going to do that, then we're going to do this. And then who's going to do it? Are you on your own? Is your family involved? If so, your family has to be involved. Where will you be and where will you go? Don't assume that you're going to all be home ready to deal with the disaster or the problem. Your wife may be at work, you may be at work, the kids might be in school, your normal days, life is going on, and then suddenly you have to implement this plan, and you may not all be able to get together right away. So when to act and where to go. So you might have meeting places, you might have alternate shelter places where you have to shelter in place until you can get together. You have to have that all worked out ahead of time. And then how each action will be taken. The more training you have, the more knowledge you have. And I can tell you without bragging that I put a lot into my books that will give you information that you need to have. Watching YouTube doesn't get it done. There's been studies done that show that when children read something, they get it a lot more than if they just watch something. Because reading engages your brain. What to do if your plan fails? And so you got to have a plan B. You got to have alternate plans because it's a disaster. Disasters tend to be disastrous. So things go sideways. Mr. Murphy tends to really come out strong, Murphy's Law, when you're in a disaster situation. Okay, plan implementation triggers. I talked about implementation triggers. I talked about the importance of having a trigger. So you're writing out this plan. It's a good idea to write it out rather than just talk it out. You should write out what are the conditions that would cause me to implement this plan. You don't want to have these things. I've experienced this over the years where people, somebody tells them this is the fright of the month or the panic. A lot of these survival salespeople pushing the fright of the, what I call the fright of the month club, where it's all coming to an end. The sky is falling. And then everybody runs out, abandons, leaves their jobs and takes off and goes to the hills or whatever. They come back 2 weeks later. So you don't want to have, you want to have realistic keys and realistic triggers that will cause you to implement your plan and not implement it too quickly. On a day-to-day basis, being aware of your surroundings and avoiding distractions is critical. We have these cell phones, smartphones, I call them dumb phones. They make you dumber. But anyhow, all these distractions, I can tell you horrible things have happened where we found people's heads on the railroad tracks with the earbuds still in their ears because they didn't hear the train coming. But you've got, especially if you live in the city, you live in the suburbs, anywhere like that, you need to be aware of your surroundings all the time. When I walk to work in Chicago every day, I had to be aware of my surroundings, on the south side of Chicago. But depending on where you live, you definitely need to be aware of what's going on. In fact, being aware is the second of my 10 principles of survival. Keeping informed about local and national and international developments. Every morning, first thing I do, turn on the radio. I look in the paper. I check the internet to see what's going on today. What kind of trends am I seeing? So you need to be an informed and aware individual. It's a key survival skill. In fact, anticipate, which is anticipating disasters, is my first principle of survival. Someday I'll do the 10 principles of survival for you guys. But examples, anyhow, the full-scale conventional or nuclear war, as I mentioned, in Europe or Asia, this is obviously a trigger to start implementing your evacuation plan or your shelter-in-place plan or your economic survival plan and all your other survival plans. During the pandemic, we were already picking up the keys that there was something going around. The doctors didn't know exactly what it was, but I put that together with what was happening in China and all the travel that's going in between. And I'm like, oh, time to implement my pandemic plan. So these are techniques you can use when you're building your plans. You can use the one on the left here. I guess it's on your left too. As threats develop, you can go to different conditions. Like right now, I'm in my basement and I'm in condition green, normal and alert. Okay. But if I'm going into Chicago, I'm going to be in condition yellow at least. Vigilant and prepared to act, and I'm going to have certain things with me, and I'm going to be prepared to do certain things. Condition orange, fully alert and for preliminary action, so to be ready to implement your plan. And condition red, which is actually carrying out your plan as things go on. So you can build a plan based on these conditions. So you got the trigger, and then you go to the conditions as things get worse. Another technique that works really well, and we developed this as we were developing plans for industry in things like, there's a fire in the chemical plant, fire in the paint factory. Yeah, I had to deal with those and make plans for those. Phase one, which would be really now, planning and gearing up for disasters of all kinds, particularly warfare, wartime, war zone, and even combat zone kind of scenarios. Even, who knows, the Red Dawn scenario, nuclear war scenarios. We have to be planning and gearing up now. Phase two, evacuate the vulnerable. So one of the things you can do or think about is like phase two, when things get really kind of gnarly, okay, I'm going to take my elderly parents or my children, and I'm going to send them to Uncle Charlie's house that lives on the country, or I'm going to put them into a motel, 50 miles from the town, or whatever I'm going to do. So I'm not going to have to deal with those people. I may still have to go to my job. I may still have to stay here, but I'm going to take care of the vulnerable folks first. Phase three, you secure everyone, get your gear out, everything, fuel up the vehicles, maybe even start moving. And phase four, of course, is take cover, fight, flight, whatever it requires, depending on the situation. Stay home or run. This is the big one. I don't know how many articles I've written related to this over the years, and how many articles I've seen. Basically, and I know back in the old days of nuclear war, nuclear war was the only thing. Basically, evacuation was the main focus of what they call a survivalist or a prepper. You had your big survival pack. Everybody had to have one of those. And I'm not dissing that at all, but nevertheless, that was the main focus. Well, shelter in place is preferable in most conditions because that's where all your stuff is. that's where your home is. That's where you've got most of your gear. You only can carry so much on your back. So if possible, if if you obviously if you live in ground zero or you live right in the track of a civil disturbance or something like that, yes, you're going to have to evacuate. If you live in an apartment building or a condo, then you're only as safe as the best, most prepared, reliable person in your building, which is probably not good. So in those cases, highly evacuation is much more likely than if you have a home or a house. Dependent so if you're shelter in place and natural disasters and locations of your level of preparedness, this all depends. If you're very prepared and you're completely dependent on the situation, then you may have to evacuate. Be able to defend and isolate for up to 6 months. So if you're going to stay in place, be able to defend your location. And we're talking about shooting, I don't know how else to put it, or at least defending your location as well as you can. Isolate up to 6 months. So your home base, though, if you're able to stay in place, it becomes your base for recovery. Once you're out in the boonies, out in the woods, you have no base to recover. You come back and your home has been burned or vandalized. So you want to avoid that if possible, but in some cases you won't be able to. So you must have that option in your plan that you're going to evacuate, or if you're not home, that you're not going to go home, you're going to go somewhere else. But out there is where all the hazards are: the weather, the cold weather, the heat, the crazy people running around with guns, the diseases, the fires. That's all it's out there. So you don't want to go out there unless you have to. So if you are, then you must have the alternative to be able to evacuate. Do not depend on no motorized transportation. Know your bicycle trails and those kind of things around your area. Can you carry your survival pack? I know a lot of people have. I'm 83 years old. My survival pack is very lightweight at this point. Okay, but I've got a lot of knowledge, but not a lot of gear because I can't carry that much gear. You should be able to carry it for about 5 miles between rest stops. Know your routes and your alternatives and your destination. Have a destination clear for your evacuation. Never go any place for the first time. Okay, now that sounds crazy, but what I'm saying is do your reconnaissance. Go on Google Earth, track over those routes, get maps, get good maps, topographical maps, and go over your evacuation routes and caches and drops. You can leave supplies at other places along your route. You can rent storage units out in the boonies, and I see storage units in these small towns and out in the boonies. You can rent one of those and put all your stuff in there if you know you're going to have to evacuate. Okay, kind of wrapping up here. These are the things that you're most likely going to have to do. You're going to have to take shelter. You're going to have to escape. Maybe you have to escape a fire, and you all should have a plan to escape a home fire. So everybody rolls off of the bed, because if you sit up in bed, the air will be 300 degrees or higher above, and your lungs will shrivel up. So you have to train everybody to roll out of bed, crawl out of the room, crawl to the door blindfolded, so that they know exactly what to do in case they wake up and the house is on fire. How to don protection. You may have respirators or whatever you need to know how to put those on. Grab the necessary supplies, and we'll talk about that, but all your supplies should not be spread out all over the house. They should be in bags and packs and handy so you can grab them, or maybe you even store them in another shed or outside the house, so if you leave the house, you can get to them. You gather the family, and then you're going to do one of three things in any disaster situation. You're going to run, hide, or fight. Now, hide also means shelter in place, or just lay down and duck, hide yourself from the flying debris or whatever. Run can be evacuation. In some cases, you're going to have to fight to stay alive. So plan whatever things you're going to have to do. Every person in your family, including your children, should be involved in the planning process. They should know what their place is in the plan and know what they're supposed to do if they're at school or at their work, or they're with their playing with their friends when the sirens go off, or the flash happens, or the smoke starts flying, or the bullets start flying, or whatever it is that, or the storm is coming. They should know what they're supposed to do. And I see these kids go to school with these big backpacks every day. I like to hope that there'll be some survival supplies and information in there for them, along with all that other stuff that they're carrying. And then training, get training for necessary skills. Everybody should get first aid training. Live Free does some terrific first aid survival training for civilians, and we focus a lot lately on trauma, which cuts and bruises and broken bones and that trauma related stuff. But we do a lot of first aid training, self-defense, especially if you live in the city. But frankly, people are going to get crazy when things get bad. So everybody should really have some self-defense skills on some level. Don't count on yourself or your family members being home, as I mentioned. Family members should all understand the trigger conditions so they know when to start acting, and they either know whether they're going to go home, or they're going to stay where they're at, or they're going to go someplace else. Maybe, and you should have designated in your family plans for everything based on this, that let's say the house catches fire and you all have to disperse. Let's say some big terrible thing happens and nobody can get home in the first place. Okay, then you've got to have some alternative locations. We're all going to meet at 10 o'clock in the woods behind the gas station, or at Aunt Mary's house, or whatever you may want to have as your alternate, or you should really have two alternate locations so that you know where your family is. So with that, we'll go to this slide. Preparedness planning. Once you have the plan, start building up your supplies and things that you need to implement the plan. Do a gap analysis. Again, I bring this to you from the professional planning side of my previous profession as a safety manager. You look at what your plan is, look at your ability to survive the kind of situations that you're anticipating, whether you live in the city, the suburbs, target area, if you live in the far suburbs, close suburbs, out in the woods, whatever. You're going to look at that and say, well, I've got almost everything I need, but I need more food. I need better water purification. I need to have more sources for maybe solar electricity, because, in a war situation, you're not going to be able to get gas for that gasoline generator for very long. So think solar in that particular case. Have a budget and a schedule. So if you're just starting out, or wherever you're at in the process of becoming self-reliant and prepared, establish a budget. How much a month are you going to spend on preparedness and food and all the supplies that you're going to need? How much time are you going to need to schedule to spend training and learning the skills that you need to survive in an emergency? How much time are you going to spend maybe helping organize your family or your community to survive in an emergency? So to continue to build basically a sustainable disaster survival system for you, your family, and maybe your community as well. So don't spend everything going as planned. Believe me, at my age, I can guarantee you that isn't the way it works. Maintain flexibility. Be able to think on your feet. Don't just be glued to your plan if the plan's not working. We're very bad lately at improvising. People don't know how to improvise anymore, how to fix things that are broken, how to make do with something else when the tool or the item or the equipment that you need isn't there. Well, what can I use instead? We need to get better at that. And we actually had a survival game based on that. The more survival knowledge you have and the more gear you have, the more flexible your plan can be. So this gives you alternatives, and alternatives takes you away from being dependent. And when you move away from dependency, that's called freedom. So again, there's to live in the free. The more self-reliant you are, the more free you are, the more choices you have. The less choice, more dependent you are, the less free you are. So one of our old mantras, it's not what you have, it's what you have with you that counts. really important. It's not what you know, it's what you do. And with that, I'm going to take some of the things that will help you out a little bit. Level one, everyday carry. Everyday carry has been a survival preparedness thing for a long time. And everyday carry, we used to call it coat pocket survival. We invented it 40 years ago, probably. The things that you carry with you every day so that you're basically a walking survival kit. And I love these pocket pants that they have now because there's extra pockets for extra stuff. And so one of the things is always carry a knife or a multi-tool. And we cover a lot of it in our newsletter. We have a lot of articles about the different multi-tools, different kinds of knives and that kind of thing. And we evaluate them. But definitely you should have some kind of knife or some kind of multi-tool. I know, of course, if you're getting on an airplane, you can't do that. I'm always, when I was flying, I would always have to put that in my carry-on. And surprisingly, how big a knife you could put in a carry-on, or not a carry-on, but a checked baggage. I mean, flashlight, powerful flashlight. Don't depend on your cell phone for your only flashlight. And they make a lot of great little 3-4 LED flashlights nowadays. N95 respirator. I know there's a lot of controversy about N95s. I'm sorry, but I think it's mostly disinformation distributed by the Chinese through various misinformed influencers. I've trained people on N95s. I've evaluated N95s. I work with N95s, and even in the worst case where we're talking about very small biological particles, they are way better than nothing. And they are usually better than than almost anything for most of the things, for fallout, for toxic dust, toxic materials flying through the air and all kinds of disasters. They will not protect you against chemical contaminants, but they'll give you a little bit of protection for a short time. And again, they're BTN, better than nothing. Whistle to get help. Bandana, which can also help as another respirator. Fire starter, always have a way to start a fire. Hand sanitizer, the alcohol-based stuff. Weapon of choice, obviously, I live in an open carry state. Depending on your situation, sometimes you don't want to, I carry sometimes I don't. It's all up to you. You can also carry pepper spray or something else, but you should have something. And the one thing I want to do to save lives right now is to mention this one right here, aspirin, because if you're over 50 and you get that chest pain as an EMT, this comes from my EMT side, if you get that chest pain and you take 4 or 5 aspirins, or a handful, 4 or 5 aspirins, not just 1 or 2, and you put those in your mouth and you call 911, you've given yourself a better chance because it's a good blood thinner. It will thin your blood, which is basically what causes, clogs in the heart. By taking the aspirin, it improves your chances of having a heart attack. Or it can just get rid of that headache you got from being in the middle of a disaster. And then level 2. Now I have actually 3 levels, but it used to be only 1 level, and that was the level 1. Now we've gone to level 2 because now level 1 would be now. Okay, I highly recommend it. You definitely increased your chances of surviving a lot by just carrying all those things. But now, if things are getting really bad and we're in wartime or a war zone scenario, let's say, oh my God, some drone attacks have been on critical infrastructure in your city or whatever. You may still have to go to your job. You may still have to stay home. But now, if you're going to go out, you're going to have to up your everyday carry. So you're going to end up carrying this maybe in a small pack on your belt, maybe a butt pack, maybe a sling pack. They call it a man purse. But I just developed one of those that you could survive for several days on. But anyhow, you're going to need a larger knife. Plastic rain ponchos. Now, these will protect you to some extent against fallout. They'll protect you against all kinds of other things, and they'll keep you warm. And if you get wet, you're going to get hypothermia sooner or later. So one of the survival rules is never get wet. Okay. Water purification tablets are one of those survival straws that purify water. Some food bars, and of course firearms and ammunition. These kind of things. And also I have here a full size tourniquet device. It's a tack tourniquet. So you can save not only your life, but other people's lives, because this isn't just about us. Okay, if it's just about you surviving and you don't care about anybody else, please turn this off, because I don't care about you either. I care about people who care about people. Okay, this is something that's unique. Live Free came up with this about 15, 20 years ago, but it still doesn't get around enough. Bedside drawer readiness. You're in bed 8, 10 hours a day, depending on how long you sleep and whether you watch TV from bed or whatever. But anyhow, long story short, you don't want, if there's smoke coming in the house is shaking, there was a big bright flash, you hear sirens going off, there's an intruder in the house, you do not want to be rummaging around trying to find the things that you need. So every night, your car keys go there, your wallet goes there, your cell phone goes there. In your drawer, you have your weapon of choice. I wouldn't have this if you have children. This is, if you have children, I could get a whole different thing. They will find it. So unless you get a lockbox with a keypad, don't have a gun, just lay it in your drawer. But if you're alone, then you can do that. A tool, because you may have to break out that window. You may have to break down that door to get out of your house and self-rescue. So you want to have something in there that you can buy these at Harbor Freight. They're made for opening crates. You can also buy online rescue tools, a really bright flashlight, what they call a tactical flashlight. There's those aspirins again. And there's that N95 respirator, which is not going to protect you from cyanide emissions from your burning carpet and all kinds of other things, but it is going to protect you against the soot and smoke. It's not going to protect you against carbon monoxide, but it is going to help you get out of the house. So leave you with that. So leave you with this last thing. This is an old Chinese proverb, and China's got a lot of good proverbs. The best time to plant a plum tree is 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a plum tree is today. And the same applies to your survival preparedness, your survival kits, your everyday carry, making your plans for surviving the variety of disasters that you could be facing. The next best time is today. So today is the time to improve. These are my books. Advanced Survival, which is basically how to replace all the different critical things that the so-called grid provides us today. So it's more of like back to basics kind of thing. This is all about gear. I have the Ultimate Survival Book of Survival Gear, which covers every element of survival equipment you could have. And then I bring them all back into the different kinds of packs and kits and things you have in your car, things you have at home, things you have at work. This Total Survival, one of the most popular ones, covers 10 ways to do everything. 10 ways to start a fire, 10 ways to build a shelter, 10 disasters to survive, all of those different kinds of things. The medical manual, I like to think it's one of the best medical manuals for survivalists ever written. I'm really happy with it. I cover both the emergency medical technician stuff, the military stuff, and then the what to do when the ambulance is never coming. And then finally 150 survival secrets, which was where I covered a lot of controversial things, like what to do when your neighbors come pounding on your door because they weren't prepared, what to do when you live in a gang infested neighborhood, that kind of thing. And my new book coming out, Surviving the Coming War, coming out now January 15th, I believe, from Skyhorse Publishing, and it may also be available from TACDA. So look for that. And with that, I'll take questions.
If anyone's listening, you just have to unmute your mic and then you can ask a question if you'd like. And here's the contact information for James, as well as that organization he was talking about. TACDA will be carrying his books, and then in the near future, you should see them show up on the TACDA store, or you can, I would imagine you can get them through that americansurvivor.org.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to be selling them through americansurvivor.org yet, but otherwise you can get them through. But if you at our events, we have them at a considerable discount, but we're not ready to ship them. So you can get them through TACDA though. for
Yeah.
sure.
Okay.
So
Right.
so this is my information. So if you want to email me, I welcome you. You can email me personally at survivorjj@aol.com. You can contact the americansurvivor.org. And we will actually even mail out. If you give us an address, we actually mail out, snail mail, so the newsletter, which a lot of organizations don't do. So I'm going to close this out
Wait,
and then I'll take your
are we
questions.
allowed to ask a question?
Yes, please ask your questions.
Okay, there's two of us on here tonight who are single women. One of them, no family, no husband, no kids, no relatives anywhere in this country. So I have nowhere to go. Disabled and elderly. Okay. Trying to prepare, have for 40 years, but don't feel prepared as in how to defend my home, can't build a safe room. A lot of things, can't carry very much. So I carry what I can. I've always had my car prepared, everything. But I feel completely helpless because I have no family, no men around, no one.
Yeah, that's,
Do you have some friends?
No.
Okay. Go ahead. Do you want to tackle that one, James?
yeah, that's a rough one. And, frankly, I can relate to some of those things because I don't have a family either, just me and my wife. And one of the things that's helped me, of course, with the organization and my organizing ability, I sort of have a little network of contact, and you have to build a network, and that's not easy to do, but you really have to get out there. And I don't know how to tell you how to do that. I don't know what your feelings are about that, but you have to meet people, talk to people, go to your local police department, go to your local fire department and tell them about your situation. They may have some suggestions for you to try to get involved in your community organizations, because everybody is really aware of what's happening. But specifically, I don't have any family either, just me and my wife. So we often philosophize on, obviously nobody's coming to help us at this point.
Right. That's right. And I've tried to offer the best experts and invite singles, families, everything. The singles refuse to take 1 second to even listen to a webinar online, a live thing like this. They don't want to come and learn how to prepare. So all of the singles that I talk to, they don't want to be involved. They don't want to get prepared. They don't think anything's going to go wrong. I joined CERT. I've taken 3 CERT refreshers. But even they tell me, we're going to stay home with our families to protect our families. We're sorry, you're on your own. It's really helpless feeling.
Do you have neighbors, or are you in an apartment
Neighbors,
building?
nope, I own my own home. Neighbors are going to do the same thing. They're going to hunker down with their families. They have no emergency preparedness. They have no emergency plan. They don't want to spend time learning it. No. And I'm here in Utah. Very shocking.
Wow.
People don't want to prepare. And that has been the hardest thing, because if I could get a network of like-minded people, we could make a plan. And that's what I've been asking everyone. We need to make a plan and make sure everybody's got the bare minimum, help each other, get those things in place, the wonderful things you talked about tonight, get all those things in place, and then have a plan, what you would do under what circumstances. We don't have anywhere to bug out, but maybe we could actually meet at one person's house so that all the people in one home have a better chance to defend that home than everybody in their own homes, right?
You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And it is difficult. I can tell you from long, hard experience that we're always selling something that no one wants to buy. They don't want to buy it until it's too late.
Yep.
And the only thing I hate to say this, but this is reality, is that plan to take care of yourself, and you're going to have to just own the situation that you have, and it doesn't sound like it's a good situation, but you're going to have to plan to deal with the situation based on the reality that you have. I would continue to expand your social circles and continue to have discussions with people. Search is an excellent place to start. Things like that. But I do understand America has gone into a deep, deep state of denial And
Yeah.
we're all fighting that battle. Organizations like TACDA, organizations like Live for USA. I've gone on, tried to get on television stations back in '80s. I know TACDA was the same way. We couldn't turn around before we were on some television station talking about civil defense. We were featured. I was featured in pretty much every major publication in the United States for a while, back in the '60s, '70s, and '80s. The newer generations, they are in deep, deep denial and deep state of unpreparedness, and all we can do is the best we can do. I wish I had a golden answer for you, but I don't.
And somebody's got a question there. Alex, go for it.
Hi,
Unmute.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Woodchuck, this is Squirrel. Okay, good. Hi, my name is Alex. If you think that the issues in Utah are, bad, which, I wholeheartedly believe what you're saying, although it's a beautiful state. I've only driven through there while moving from one military installation to another. Up in Massachusetts, where I live, orders of magnitude probably less community-like. I've heard somewhere that's less than 1% of the population of the country serves in the military. I'm not saying that you have to be a veteran to be able to serve our nation. Clearly not. The very first service people within our nation were Minutemen. They were people who were local community people who took it up to fight against the British horde. But back then, there seemed to be a certain selflessness that people had. People understood that there was one price of freedom. That price was blood. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how we look at it, in my opinion, I think we've been somewhat spoiled. People haven't had to understand that hard, visceral fact that there's a real stake in not defending ourselves. There's a real stake in not ensuring that we have some semblance of rule of law, some safeguard in order to protect our loved ones and our, own overall well-being from catastrophic scenarios. And one of the things that I was concerned with, I'm 45. I understood about fallout shelters when I was a kid. Buildings had fallout symbols on them. We knew where to go just in case. I wasn't always in my house. Right now, they seem to be relics. I question, even if there are fallout shelters where I live, that they're maintained. I wonder what kind of stockpiles they'll have. So when FEMA, I saw in the comments that under President Carter, civil defense turned into FEMA, which now is under the Department of Homeland Security. And the priority is not, it's just not there anymore. These lessons were forgotten. People died of radiological issues from nuclear attacks. Fortunately, they weren't on American soil, but these were lessons that were learned with blood. And so when it's all said and done, my concern is that when something happens, there's an entire generation between when civil defense was ended and, God forbid, if something happens now. So where do I find out where fallout shelters are? And also, to caveat on the other speaker's point, the sense of community just isn't as much as it used to be. So I don't know. I know that was, I forget what it was. It was something like American contingency, I believe it was said. Things like that, where people can get together, I find will probably be essential, because the people who I know are organized during awful situation are people like gang members. They have plenty of organization. They have hierarchies, they have ranks, they have weapons, they have all kinds of ideologies that go along with them. And tragically, sometimes, I hate to say it, I question whether the meek will inherit the earth, because there's one universal language that I've seen in my 3 combat tours, and that's food chain. So if anyone could comment on that, I would appreciate it.
In my upcoming book, I have a whole chapter on military skills for civilians, just to deal with exactly what you say. We don't have a lot of veterans around anymore. Our organization was kind of built on a lot of veterans with their experiences. But previous books, I didn't touch on those kind of subjects, but I definitely covered on fortifying your home. I had to cover weapons use, weapons, improvising weapons, those kind of things, which are very controversial. And I didn't cover in my disaster related books. But in this latest book, I had to cover the kind of things that people in the Ukraine and people in and other countries are experiencing that's coming to a neighborhood near you in the near future. And our organization, Live for USA, back in the 60s, in addition to the nuclear war survival, we also spent extensive time training people in basic military movement, basic military skills, how to evacuate under wartime conditions, which is entirely different than evacuating during a disaster or when FEMA is there. And yes, you're right. FEMA has completely shifted us away from what civil defense was all about back when TACDA and the Live Free were organized. And by the way, they've taken all these signs pretty well down. Back in the 80s, they stripped out all these old shelters. We actually wound up with quite a few of their radiological monitoring equipment, some of their foods and things like that they had. They had big drums full of water. They had medical supplies, all those kind of things. All of that stuff is gone. Those shelters no longer exist, unfortunately, right when we're in a situation where we may need them the most. So yeah, as the lady just said, we're kind of all on our own in a way. But yeah, we've covered that. In fact, I'd love to have a conversation with you and send you some more information if you want to contact me at survivorjj@aol.com.
Alex, I would
Absolutely.
also suggest that on the TACDA website, the book Nuclear War Survival Skills is just what it says. Plus, it handles everything else. After nuclear war, you're going to have to fend for yourself, and it talks about expedient wheat grinders, expedient sheltering, expedient, everything that you can build with commonly available materials. So, and if you understand the principles of what you need for shielding, then you can actually look for parking structures or commercial buildings in your area, and you can use some of those for a place to hide out, in the event of a nuclear attack. There are certain types of structures. The all the signs that they put on public buildings that said fallout shelter, they only had to have a protection factor of 10 in order to qualify as a protection as a fallout shelter. And most of them have removed the signs, or the buildings are old and they've gotten rid of them or whatever. But you can do pretty good, say a house with a basement, and just rearranging some of your food storage and things like that. You can actually build you a pretty good shelter in a home that has a good basement.
In fact, our latest newsletter, Nuclear War Survival Made Simple. We basically cooked it down to the real basics, but this is our latest newsletter. Be glad to send a free copy to anybody that wants it.